All right, man. Today is Tuesday. It is July 19th. Welcome to the Dog Walk, presented by Barstool Sports. I'm here with Chief. Chief, how are you today?
I'm hurting. I'll just tell you the truth. I got some kind of migraine situation going. I got this Eddie Olchuk thing going. Like, there's a lot going on, and the result is that my head feels like it's going to explode, but I'm going to do my best on
How
this.
much do you blame it that you played soccer this weekend?
Well, that's for all my lower body issues that I'm having. Like, I'm listed as questionable at best for this Chicklets Cup. Like, I tried to kick a soccer ball. I don't know why I decided I would try to do a sport that A, I've never really done, and B, I just don't like my first workout in like a year is going to be something like athletic with change of directions and doing motions that I would never do. I should have just like gotten on an elliptical for a year and then tried to do soccer.
Was it like a competitive game?
It was a pickup game, but yeah, like there were a couple people who played college soccer there, a couple of girls who were like awesome.
Really?
Like awesome and like fast. And I was just like, I'm not even going to try to keep up with them. Mm-hmm. And so I was like hanging back, and I got the ball. I was trying to like boom it down the length of the field. Bad idea. Yeah. Don't exert energy with all your might, because you'll end up like dead. And I feel kind of dead. And we were supposed to have like this shootout with a goalie from the Fire tomorrow, and I'm just like, I can't do it. We're gonna have to push it until August because I'm on the IR.
They're in season though, right? The Chicago Fire.
Mm-hmm.
Where can people find some tickets to the games?
You got to go to GameTime. GameTime, I've been told actually that the Soldier Field experience is kind of cool for the soccer.
Oh,
that
nice.
You can have a good time there. It's so much easier to get to than the old one. And the easiest way to get there is obviously by getting your tickets through GameTime.
Yep, GameTime is the exclusive ticketing partner of Barstool Sports. GameTime is a ticketing app that makes it easier than ever to score last-minute deals on tickets to sporting events, concerts, and shows. They guarantee the lowest price. They really crack the code on how to score last-minute deals on last-minute tickets. You can find MLB tickets for under $15 all in on GameTime. Yankees tickets as low as $14, Red Sox $14, Mets $13, Braves $14, Cubs $12. You name the team, GameTime has the hookup on the deals for you to get out to the ballpark.
I'm going to guess that number for the Cubs
is even lower.
It's going to come down after that All-Star break when it's like this team's got nothing left. Mm-hmm. So
the best part about it all is you get $20 off your first purchase. Download the GameTime app. Go to the account tab to create a login and redeem code DOGWALK for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Make sure you know that terms do apply. Download GameTime, last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
We've obviously we've had this ad deal, and we've used tickets through the ad deal. I do just use it in my personal life too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's super easy to use, and it is like they have genuinely better prices than I see other places.
Yeah,
so
once you got the app, you're in.
You're in.
And I said that yesterday's draft. So
yep,
go download GameTime. All right, Chief. What's the topic of the day today?
I mean, we got like a Strauss-Howe situation going on, I feel like every week, and this is
I wish I could say I was shocked.
Yeah, but it does feel like we have all these problems all over the world, and it just makes you think of the same thing, and no place has that been exemplified more, I would say, than in Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka, I don't know if you saw, I think it was over the weekend, where I was scrolling through Twitter in the morning, and there was like this, like thousands, it looked like thousands of people outside of this like almost like a palace, but it was like the presidential residence in Sri Lanka. Thousands and thousands of people, and the president wasn't there. He had fled, and they eventually stormed the presidential palace. Did you see that?
I saw that video.
Wasn't that fucking crazy?
It was insane.
So that's what kind of sparked my interest about like, what the fuck? Because like, how often do you really think about Sri Lanka? Never.
No, just when I heard that Nicki Minaj song.
Yeah. That's that song.
It's called Monster.
Yeah. It was like a viral TikTok trend for a while too.
You're impressed that I know that song?
Yeah, he's got it. He's TikTok.
I saw the Stranger Kids thing, sang it on Jimmy Fallon.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's like a super dad of me to know that.
Yeah, from them, from Millie Bobby Brown.
Can you say the line?
Met a
Pull
bad
up in
bitch
Sri Lanka.
From
What?
Sri Lanka, right? Wasn't it? Met a bad bitch that came from Sri Lanka? No,
I think that's
something like that.
Yeah.
Pull up. Am I a Nicki fan?
Because Millie Bobby Brown like rapped it like perfectly. Okay. It was very impressive.
Yeah. So anyway, so that there was that, and then I want to say it was in whatever. No one talks about Sri Lanka ever, but they're like this little island country. They got 22 million people there, so it's not exactly small, but it's this island off the coast of India. It's been independent for a long time, And they've also been having a civil war since they had a civil war that ran from 1983 until 2009. And basically what came out with the end of the Civil War was done by basically one family. They had one family, and I'll try my best to pronounce the name, but they're the Rajapaksa, something like that, family out of Sri Lanka. And for forever in Sri Lanka, and when I say a civil war, it wasn't like a 50-50, like a North versus South thing. It was like you had this group of rebels who were fighting. They call themselves like the Tamil Tigers or something like that. And they were fighting and causing chaos. And I want to say maybe even during an episode of like Parts Unknown or one of those Anthony Bourdain shows, like he like came across some of like the violence from like while he just happened to be taping there.
Oh, really?
So it's been a thing that's been going on for a long time. And then this family, this guy gets elected in 2005, and then he names his brother Minister of Defense, and the two of them together like kind of squash out the rebels, and they win. Okay, they win the war, and it's officially over, and they're kind of lauded as heroes. And they took that moment, that political capital, that political goodwill, and promptly ran the country into the ground. So they got elected. They came into office in 2005, and there's, talk about a callback episode, but they got accused of all sorts of like corruption things, including like the Belt and Road Initiative. Like there's this Chinese built airport that is just completely unused. And so like they're in big time debt to China. And that was one of these things where they were like, we're going to try to borrow money from foreign enterprises to and prop up our own currency to invite foreign capital. And then they wanted to, raise the economy. Like the war is over. Like we have some leeway here and a real opportunity to change things for the better. And it was working. So like they doubled the GDP from 2006 to 2008, but they did it kind of artificially. It's not like they had all this industry coming in or these big projects or anything like that. They did it kind of through borrowing means. But like the middle class was booming, okay, in Sri Lanka by Sri Lanka standards. And then by international standards, I think it was like 1.6 million people were raised out of poverty at this time. So people are living high on the hog. They're feeling good. Things are going well. But it was like a paper, it was a fallacy. Like there was no like underlying like, oh my God, like we have this industry going, we have that industry going. It was all just financial instruments to prop up the economy. And then it got to the point where the debt caught up to them. So while the middle class was growing from 2006 to 2014, the debt tripled. So the economy doubled, but the debt tripled, and it became 119% of the GDP. So that's like a very tenuous situation when you're borrowing more money than you can possibly make. Like that's like the United States is in all kinds of crazy debt, but we have the most robust economy still in the world, where we produce a lot of things, create a lot of services, create a lot of technology. And so we're able to offset some of that debt. And we also have other financial instruments, like we're still the default currency for the world, which has some advantages tied to it. So then there was like this kind of almost like a perfect storm to knock out this government and really kind of kill the Sri Lankan economy, because it was on like a razor's edge because of all the debt. Okay. So and some people are pointing to corruption for this, where they cut taxes dramatically, but they cut it mostly for like kind of almost themselves, like the upper 1%. And that cut their revenue, like the government revenue, by 25%. So now you're not taking in as much money as you thought. And they got to the point where they were like, holy shit, we are going to default on our loans if things don't turn around. So they were like very worried. Then bam, COVID hits. And Sri Lanka had become kind of a blossoming tourist destination. And so they had, done some projects to, when I said like they don't have a lot of industries that are growing, tourism actually was. So tourism is really important to countries like this, because when you have all this foreign debt, a good way to kind of be able to dig yourself out is to have foreigners come in with their own money. So that way you're taxing them, you're getting money from them that they're leaving it in your economy, and then you can use that money to repay whatever, as opposed to taxing your own citizens. So that COVID restriction, where there's no travel for a year, really, or a couple of years, really hurt them. And then their travel and their tourism industry was basically killed by the war in Russia and Ukraine, because for whatever reason, the two countries that visit Sri Lanka the most by a wide margin are Russians and Ukrainians. Those are the two groups for I don't know why that would be, but that's why. So if you have like this, you have this debt problem, you have this money problem, where they're just like, they can't even pay their own debt. Then one of your major industries is impacted by COVID, and then it's killed by the war in Ukraine. You're like, that's kind of like a perfect storm. And then what really set people off was they banned, and this is kind of related to the way that they say, like, hey, we just didn't want to be spending all this money abroad. And one of the things that it was one of their big imports, they're trying to tip the balance of importing and exporting. So they would be a net positive. One of their biggest imports was fertilizer. And this has become an issue all around the world. We've seen it, and we'll get into like the Dutch in a second here. But they were going to be like, hey, we're going to lean into, they talked to the IMF, they talked about, these different global organizations, and they're like, we're going to be the first to go 100% organic. And they put this policy in overnight where there's no more nitrogen fertilizer in Sri Lanka. So that really was like the final straw that set them. That was in the beginning that was like November. I think that was spring of 21. They put that into place. And there were so many protests and so many issues that they repealed the law, or repealed the ban on nitrogen in November of 21. But it was like too late. So they had already impacted, began to have to start importing food for the first time. And then in addition to tourism, some of their biggest industries have always been rubber, tea, and rice. So they didn't have enough food, rice, to feed their own people, so they could no longer export rice. So that was a problem. Then with the tea, their yields, tea and rubber, because rubber, I'm assuming that this is a rubber tree and not like a rubber from oil, as an oil byproduct. So those two major industries that they usually export, now they just don't have like any growth, any yield. So they're like, their numbers are down. And then because the food had to be imported and their dollar was so weak and they didn't have domestic food, the price of food went up. So then it was just like, it snowballed and everything got out of control. So they actually, because the dollar was so weak and they're like, all these international services basically like kicked them out of the world currency market. Like it's almost kind of similar like Venezuela, where like your dollar is worth so little that you have no buying power domestically or abroad, and your credit rating is so low that we can't give you any more loans to help you pay back your other loans. So it's like, you guys are just fucked. So like they got to the point where companies are like, hey, if you're like on a cross, trans-Pacific, let's say, flight, if you're going from somewhere in the Middle East, let's say, a lot of times your layover would be in Sri Lanka. Well, they said that you can't do that anymore, because when you land, having to refueling in Sri Lanka, where their prices are just out of control, we have to land somewhere else, because their price for gasoline for airlines was just insane. And they ended up not being able to get any gas or any petrol anywhere, to the point that the government stopped the legal sale of all oil and gas. Or cooking gas, like they would sell like propane tanks for homes, and that price went up 55%. And so it was like they had enough oil for one day, so they were just like rationing it for like the military and like whoever like really truly needed it for government services. So people didn't have food, they didn't have any energy, and then then they couldn't even get paper in. So all schools and exams were canceled because they didn't have any paper to take the exam. So like, that's how bad things were there, where like you're like a basic common need, food and energy. You hear about shortages of that all the time, but they couldn't get literally anything down to a piece of paper to take a test.
I mean, schools just have paper on paper.
That's all they had. It's just a whole building of just nothing but paper.
Yeah.
So they didn't have paper for the entire country. And it was like, that is how dire it got.
Jesus.
And it's still like that. So then it's like the people are like revolting. They're turning on that family that kind of ended the Civil War because they enacted all these policies. And, you know, the inflation, they can't get food. They can't get gas. And it got to the point where it's like, hey, like this is completely fucked. And though that family is now basically in exile. They left when the presidential palace was being stormed. The president himself had moved to a naval base, and then they saw somebody else, and it might have been him, that he went to Singapore and he was like out shopping, like the country, like he's just like, I'm fucking out of here.
Yeah.
But, and then there's like all these corruption charges where, you know, like what kind of deals did you get us into with these, you know, Chinese state officials? And, you know, like did you have some kind of like Swiss bank account somewhere, or crypto account where you're just like, you're getting paid on the side to get you into bed with China and all these other services, and then your country just, meanwhile, like your average person can't even get food. Mm-hmm. So that's like some of the major charges, that there's big time corruption in addition to some of these policy issues that led to, it was really like the collapse of a country, and a country that was doing pretty well. Like they had surpassed, like they were known as one of like the more modern economies at one point of Southeast Asia. So like, you know, you think about like Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Sri Lanka was like up that way, like as one of these countries that are doing better than, I don't know, Laos, or one of these people that you know, if you raise 1.6 million people out of poverty, like that's not nothing. Like that's a big deal. That's like something that should be talked about, but it was just done on the back of financial instruments and no real genuine strengthening of their economy, which led them here, where the people just revolt and genuinely overthrow the country, overthrow the government.
Hey, real quick, let's take a quick break here. Let's talk about ChevyDriveChicago.com. Obviously, you guys already know about that. We talk about ChevyDriveChicago.com all the time and what you need for the road. But how about Chevy Sales Chicago? Have you heard of that, Chief?
I have. We've been talking about it. This is I love our listeners. Mm-hmm. I'm going to hate whoever wins this. I'm going to fucking hate him.
Why?
Because I love being out on Lake Michigan in the summer. Like that to me is like the embodiment of Chicago in the summer. Like I'm always super jealous of those people with boats. And now the people with boats are going to be our listeners who go and win this contest. And that annoys me because I want to win.
Well, now's your chance if you want to sail Chicago. This summer, your local Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana Chevy dealers are giving away multiple boat charters with Tailgate the Lake. All you have to do to enter to win the Chevy Sales Chicago sweepstakes is go to ChevyDriveChicago.com. So go do that. Go check out how you can win.
You can sign up. Because like I hate doing stuff like that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Carl did one of these where he signed up while we were doing the ad read. He got it done in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's super easy and worth it. Like who doesn't want to day out on the boat with your friends?
Go do that. Get a boat. ChevyDriveChicago.com. All right, let's hop back into the show. Some bad beats too, though. I mean, you know, with the war and then obviously COVID.
That's tough.
What are you gonna like?
That's tough. But it was really that farming policy that really was like the thing that sunk them. So like the tourism thing is that hurt.
Yeah.
But the farming, where they don't have enough food, and then so prices of oil go up all over the world, but they're especially high in Sri Lanka because they're this island, so they have to ship everything in. So it's just always going to be, it's like when you ship stuff to Hawaii, right? Like a gallon of milk in Hawaii is going to be way more expensive than a gallon of milk here.
Yeah.
And that's just like part of that is just from being an island nation. So they kind of saw like the downsides of these bad policy decisions hit them more quickly and more acutely than we would if we saw them here.
Yeah.
I've just never seen food revolts kind of all over the world. Like we had an episode about food wars not that long ago, but Panama's having like widespread food shortages and they're having crazy protests. The Dutch farmers are probably the ones getting the most publicity, probably. Have you seen that?
No.
So it reminds me a little bit of the Canadian truckers thing, where they did the same thing. So their situation was a little bit more complicated, where you have these like group of environmental activists, and they're like, doom is coming, like doom is coming. Like this is the end of the world. We have to enact all these policies and no more nitrogen. and we have to cut methane costs, which would be if you're raising any sort of livestock, right? So your cows and your chickens and all this they shit and poop and fart, and it puts methane out in the atmosphere. It's a greenhouse gas. It's supposedly warming the planet. Although there's conflicting data on that too. So the Dutch government kind of concedes to this activist group, and they're like, yeah, but we'll do that. We'll get down to those levels that you're looking for by 2030. And they're like, that's too late. 2030, that's not enough time. Yet, so they went to court. They went to the basically like the Supreme Court of the Netherlands. And the courts were like, no, you have to implement these laws that you passed for 2030 now. So then they're like, all right, like, I guess we're going all organic too. But then the farmers are like, well, then we can't fucking grow anything. And if you're a farmer who's raising chickens, and again, I'm making up the numbers here, but let's say that you have to, in order to make a profit, you have to raise 25,000 chickens. Well, sorry, that's above your methane allotment. So you can only raise 15,000 chickens on your piece of land. So you just took 40% of their economic output of their earnings are now out the window based upon this government policy. So then they can't operate. So then they have to close down. So it got to the point that every farmer basically in the entire country, 30,000 of them are in protest, and they're blocking roads with tractors. They're saying like you have to go all organic. So they're taking manure, which would be an organic fertilizer, spraying it on government buildings. And it's been like a huge controversy in Europe, and specifically, obviously, in the Netherlands, because they're basically just revolting against their own government. And they're like, hey, like, you're preventing us from making a living. And the data, the science is just not there yet, like conclusively that this way of farming and I'm pro organic. Like I basically shop at Whole Foods. I basically only eat, when I shop, I basically try to get organic as much as possible. So like, I get it, but if given the choice between no food or conventionally raised food, give me the nitrogen food. And so the farmers just like, it's such a hard thing because they've been farming this way, this modern Western way of farming with all the fertilizers, been doing it for 70 years now, basically since the 50s, that we've had all kinds of crazy soil erosion. And because you've eroded the soil and damaged the soil so much by this monocrop farming, that you can't just switch to organic overnight. And you can't grow anything unless you have nitrogen fertilizer. Otherwise, it's just like trying to grow it in concrete. Like, you just don't have the nutrients in the soil to be able to farm and get any sort of output or yield. So these policies are hurting the farmers, and it prevents them from making a living because they're enacted overnight. And then it's going to hurt the country because there's just going to be lower food output. So then food prices, which are going up all over the world, a lot of it has to do with Russia and Ukraine, but it's problems everywhere. It's going to be even more acute in the Netherlands because of these kind of arbitrary policies that they enacted. And then you had this activist group who took it to court to get their way in a more timely manner. And I kind of understand their point of view too, of taking it to court, because like, how often is the government does that shit all the time, right? Like, they say, yeah, we'll do it in 2030. And then there's like, let's actually make that 2045. Let's make it 2060. And then they just keep pushing the ball down the road so they never have to deal with any problems. So they went to court to basically be like, no, we want this enacted now. You said you were going to do it. And then the court ruled in their favor. And now you have a whole country in Europe kind of shut down because the farmers are taking over and blocking roads and doing things the same way that the Canadian truckers did. Damn. Yeah. So it's crazy times.
Yeah. And I hope hopefully we'll be able to splice in that video on YouTube, but it's fucking crazy.
The Sri Lanka one? I'm sure Harry with social clips will do that too, but
crazy. Yeah. Dude. It's fucking crazy.
Well, and then like you see them, and it was like when you see like the helicopter view of this massive, like this angry mob outside the palace, you're like, holy fuck, like this is, imagine being on the inside It would be so scary.
Fuck yeah.
And then they storm it, and then they cut back in. You seen that footage?
No,
they're barbecuing, they're cooking in the kitchen,
really?
They're stealing the booze, they're floating in the pool. Like they were having a grand old time in the palace that they raided.
All I saw was probably you retweeted it. Was
Yeah.
the helicopter footage of them going in the front doors.
Yeah, like storming the gates.
Yeah, that's all I saw.
Yeah, so
Crazy.
that like then like the next cut was like they're having a great time.
Damn.
Yeah.
Now this is kind of off topic, but do you Canadians they go to Cancun, right? Is that a thing? Mexico?
I think so. Yeah, there's probably
I feel like
snowbirds that get down there.
Every time I went to Mexico, it's always been like Canada people.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sure. Like I know they go to like Arizona and Florida a lot too.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, warmer climates.
Yep.
But you just bringing up Ukraine and Russia, going to Sri Lanka was
crazy.
a fun fact.
Yeah.
Not a fun fact for them. I mean, that's brutal.
Right. But it doesn't seem like that close.
No, it's really not.
Yeah. So I was surprised to learn that of all, like I would like maybe China or Australia, like that would make sense to me for, you know, if you're from like an affluent country and you're going to travel abroad somewhere, I would think that like Australians would make more sense.
Yeah,
but
it's not too far. But I would like a Canadian listener to let me know if that's a thing. I feel like Cancun in Canada
that's a travel spot.
Yes, I feel like that's a thing.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why they started. That was like one of their arguments for putting hockey teams in Florida. It was like, wow, we'll have all the snowbirds from Canada and the Northeast, and they'll just become fans of the Lightning and the Panthers.
They'll just move down.
Yeah. Or they're there in the winter already.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
And I think that is true. Like if you watch a Tampa Bay Lightning game or let's say a Florida Panthers game, they're playing the Maple Leafs, Red Wings, or the Canadiens, it's like 90% of the other team's fans.
Yeah, there's people
snowbirds.
Mm-hmm. Damn. Well, hopefully things get better. That's all there really is to say.
I mean, I don't know how these things get better.
Yeah.
I wish someone knew how to fix them, but it does feel like there's this kind of, we'll just squeeze the little guy.
Yeah.
It's just a farmer. It's just a trucker. Let's just, fuck them. Put these policies in place. And then, that's kind of how it looks. And I kind of have empathy or sympathy. I always get those two things mixed up.
Me too.
For the farmer. Empathy and sympathy?
Yeah.
Do you guys want to look it up? What's the difference? Do you know the difference, Tom?
I'll look it up.
Yeah. So
empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. To understand and share.
Sympathy is your own perspective on it.
Or it's a feeling of pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune.
Okay. So I think I have sympathy then.
Yes.
Because I've never experienced it.
Exactly.
Sympathy involves the understanding from your own perspective. Empathy involves putting yourself in the other person's shoes and understanding why they might have those particular feelings. So I think you have sympathy.
Gotcha.
I think I might have both. I think I'm right. I don't know. I feel like we sound really stupid right now. But yeah, that's what's going on. Sounds very fucking bad.
Yeah, not good.
Not good.
Well, shit.
Yeah. So just another place where, I don't know, world's falling apart.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like.
Well, all right then, Chief. Thank you. Thanks everybody for listening. That's it for today. We will be back tomorrow. We will see you then.